Chapter 2, Intuitive Eating. What is intuitive eating really about? First, let's start off with these quotes. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Buckminster Fuller. Also by Einstein, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So what really is intuitive eating? First and foremost, intuitive eating is anti-diet. It is not about tracking foods, counting calories, exchanges, telling yourself what you're allowed to eat or not allowed to eat. Intuitive eating is about nourishing your body. And most importantly, it's about building internal trust and building communication within your body. So, for example, when we think about listening to the body and the body communicating, I really actually think one of the best examples is about the signal when you need to go to the bathroom. When your bladder is full, your body gives you a sensation, the brain interprets that and then knows it needs to take action. So nobody else can tell you when you need to pee or not. That is just something that is very intuitive. It's personal to you based on the signals within your body. Now, the same thing is actually true for hunger and fullness. For example, if you've ever tried to feed a toddler, you can tell when they're done eating, they're done eating. And when they're hungry, they want to eat, even if they just had a snack 20 minutes ago. So our body is actually designed and wired to tell us when we need food. The glucose in our liver and in our cells, there's all kinds of chemical and chemistry reactions going on in the body that are letting us know when we actually need energy. So our hunger and fullness cues are kind of like the full fuel gauge on a car. Your body lets you know when it's empty and it lets you know when it's full. Now, what happens when it comes to food and eating is that oftentimes we've learned to override those cues. Either we eat because we're in the mood, or we eat because it's comforting or distracting, or because everybody else is eating. So we eat for a lot of reasons in today's world besides our actual personal fuel gauge of our body giving us the red light or the green light about whether or not it needs energy and food and nourishment. So one of the big tenets about eating disorders is eating disorders are not about the food. Eating disorders are about other kinds of trauma and coping mechanisms that are going on deep within a person that's unique to them. That being said, food can aggravate the issue. We're going to talk more about the components of like nutrition and whole foods and why that even matters, if it matters, in a later chapter. But I do want to acknowledge that some foods do feel addictive and some foods do feel really bingey. And we're going to be talking about some ways to navigate around like bingey foods, foods that feel addictive. For example, people are always ask me about what to do about sugar. So we'll be unpacking some of this as we go. What do I really mean by intuition? Let's just start by differentiating that intuition is not the same thing as like a psychic skill. That's a whole other category for somebody else to unpack. But when we're talking about intuition, what we really understand about intuition, the best definition yet is that it's a culmination of our senses and our subconscious. And what that means is that we have so many neural pathways in the gut, the heart, and the brain that are always collecting information. And what we want to be able to do is use our sensitivity and our listening skills to be able to understand the communication, and essentially it's like our body has its own language and we want to be able to listen to that language. This is again why if you identify as a highly sensitive person, that sensitivity is going to be a superpower once you know how to use it. One of my favorite examples about intuition is actually from people who were studying it, and they interviewed a firefighter chief and they asked him how when they're fighting a fire and the firefighters in the building, when they know how to pull everybody out of the building and to keep everyone safe. And at first glance, he's like, well, I don't know. It's just experience. I know when we've reached an emergency and we need to pull everybody out. But when he was pressed to further define some really kind of small cues, he was able to recognize that actually there's a certain feeling when the heat in the building increases, and it changes the feeling of the mask, his mask he's wearing, the protective mask around his face, and also that the floor gets a little softer when the building's really heating up, and that's a feeling that he registers from his feet. But all of these little subtleties are so small. Our subconscious brain is recognizing it, but it's not always something that comes fully conscious. So we often don't realize it's a thought through thing, but it's this culmination of all of our senses that leads into a place of knowing. So intuition it's a gut sense, it's a feeling. It's often something that is actually pretty difficult to explain why you know what you know. But it's a felt sense, and it's not woo-woo. It's actually pretty scientific based on the nervous system and the sensations and prior experience in your body. So what intuitive eating is really about, it's a trial and error process to reestablish self-trust. The idea here is that eating itself, at least originally, is a natural process, and it is possible for it to be easy and enjoyable. Our ancient human ancestors ate what was available to them. They weren't in this place where food is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where they're consumed with like advertisements for pizza and cake and weight loss, where there's all kinds of food just even at like the gas stations and the shoe stores, where we're getting all these messages about food, where for most of our evolutionary process, food was something we really had to work for. So as far as we understand, our brains are pretty wired that when we see food or think about food, it's a good time to eat it. Because historically, again, food was not readily available. Now, clearly, all of that has changed in the last 200 years. Another really important thing about intuitive eating is that it's not about willpower. Willpower evaporates. Willpower is like a honeymoon experience where you've got it for the first few days of typically a diet or an exercise practice, and then we lose it. So willpower, at least as we traditionally define it, is not something to build a sustainable model on. So here are 5 quick ways to think about intuitive eating basics. Eat when you're hungry. Eat in a calm environment. Enjoy your food, eat until you're satisfied, and then check in about it. Now we're going to break all of these down in a much more detail. Let's start with hunger. So this is maybe a challenging concept here, but what I really want to introduce is that hunger is your ally. Hunger is actually your friend. If you've been involved in binge eating, emotional eating, yo-yo dieting, hunger is typically something we fear, we hate, we feel a lot of animosity towards. It's something that can cause us to constrict and push it away. And I'm here in this class to really suggest that we need to completely invert that hunger is a natural cue within your body. And so what we want to do in this intuitive eating process is learn how to work with nature, not against it. Anytime we're working against nature, we are setting ourselves up to fail. So hunger is an ally. It's a friend. It's wired within your body. And so the more we can do to start to trust hunger, the more you're going to start to come in line with listening to your body. And the affirmation that I think works really well here is, I feed my body when I'm hungry. Now, what that doesn't say is I don't eat when I'm not hungry. Because again, a lot of times coming from eating disorder history or diet land, a lot of times we have like food scarcity, meaning we're afraid you're going to run out of calories, you're afraid you're going to run out of points. At the end of the day, you're still going to be hungry, you're not supposed to eat. So saying I won't eat is just going to activate some of those fear messages in the brain. So again, that's why the affirmation is I feed my body when I'm hungry. And whenever you find yourself at like points of confusion or uncertainty, I feed my body when I'm hungry. Even if you've just had a big binge and you're feeling nervous, upset, regretful, the best way forward is to allow yourself to stay in the moment and to do the next indicated thing, meaning you don't have to restrict or do things to kind of burn off those calories. What you want to do is you want to wait until you're hungry and then feed your body. And so I'm kind of just hammering this home. I feed my body when I'm hungry. And again, that's really important for being the antidote to these fears of food scarcity. So hunger. Hunger can mean a lot of different things to different people. Because it is an intuitive kind of sensation-based experience in the body, sometimes it does help to use this hunger and satiety scale. So this is basically a tool for your intellectual mind. It's based on rating your hunger and fullness from 0 to 10. So we'll start in the middle. 5 represents neutral. You're not hungry or full. Going up means going towards getting full, moving from 5 to 6. 6 means you've eaten, but you don't necessarily feel the food in your belly, but you've got a sense of completion and a sense of no longer being hungry. Going from a 6 to a 7, at a 7, you can actually feel the food in your belly and you feel a sense of contentment and satisfaction. An 8 starts to represent fullness that's at a level of discomfort or too much. A 9 is where you're definitely uncomfortable. 10 is actually almost to the point where you're in pain and you need to lay down. So moving the other direction, once again, 5 is neutral. You're not hungry or full. 4 means you're starting to get some of your body's clues that hunger is starting to show up. Usually that's a time where you might be thinking about food. Often a 4 is a place where you should be preparing food, because going down the line is 3. At the 3, you're clearly hungry. You've got some clear signs. You know for a fact that your body is hungry and it wants food. If you get all the way to a 2, that's more that hangry line where your mood's activated. You might have a low mood. You might have low blood sugar. You might even feel like kind of a foggy brain or faint. And at a 1, you're actually kind of feeling rather impaired because you're so hungry. So the idea here is that the ideal range is generally considered to be between a 3 and a 7. At a 4, you want to be preparing food or maybe having a snack if a meal's not going to be ready soon. At 3, you're eating. And then typically you eat until you're at a 6 or a 7, depending on what's right for you. So again, these are numbers for you to start to use as a check-in process to get to know your own hunger, because hunger and fullness show up differently for different people. Let's talk a bit more about hunger, actually. So hunger for some people feel growling in their belly. They can hear it or they feel like rumbles, but that's not true for everybody. For some people, they have more of it's hard to put their finger on it, but just like a sense of blood sugar being decreased. Some people have like a little bit of headaches, or they just notice it's harder to think. So hunger can show up really differently for different people. So that's something to start to pay attention to, is what does hunger mean for you? And again, within this whole concept that hunger is your ally, you want to keep your body nourished. So getting too hungry is often going to throw you off. Many people have had that experience where you get too hungry and it almost feels like you can't get full. So keeping your body nourished, knowing that meals are ready and available, or snacks again if a meal's too far off, that's going to be a really important thing to like reestablishing body trust. Something else that you can do, and again, this is going to seem subtle, so I'm going to encourage you not to overlook it, but to pause and take 3 breaths before starting each meal. I'm taking a few breaths right now. Our ability to slow down, especially when you're working to reestablish this trust with your body, to reestablish this relationship with your hunger and fullness cues. Not everybody's got time, nor really should they be meditating for 20 minutes before a meal. But honestly, 3 breaths does a lot for establishing like a sense of presence. And when you do that, that helps you focus on eating using all of your senses. It also helps you connect to your physical and emotional state before eating. So this pause is really, really effective as a simple check-in, and it barely takes any time, but it makes a lot of difference. What I meant by being able to use all of your senses, that means slowing down enough to taste the flavor, the texture of food, the smell of the food or the environment you're in, the appearance, all the colors, the temperature of the food, and even the sound. Is it crunchy? Things like that. So what we want to do as presencing ourselves in the moment is to be fully in witness of this process of eating. And we're spending a lot of time here talking about hunger in eating because when eating is out of balance, to be honest, most of the time it's because, yes, we're eating. In fact, you might be shoveling food in, but you're barely there. In fact, how many times have you ever noticed where you taking a fork full of food, but you've actually not even paying any attention to the food that's already in your mouth. And so you pretty much just swallow as soon as the food, the fork is full. And so if you were to create rules about I can't eat or I'm not allowed to eat or I don't have enough calories, again, that generates food scarcity. We're doing just the opposite. We're going to turn and focus more attention on the aspect of eating, the experience of eating, the physical, emotional, for some people they might say spiritual, but that full body experience of being with your meal. So a little bit more about hunger, because hunger can get confusing. It can take a while to distinguish between like emotional hunger and physical hunger. And there's something that I call the apple test. So it's pretty simple. It's just a thought experiment. The idea here is if you're not sure if you're hungry or not, physical hunger will grow. So you can wait until you're clear and then keep checking in. Am I hungry? But the thought experiment that's called the apple test is to imagine if somebody offered you an apple. Now, assuming you're not allergic to apples, typically if somebody's pretty hungry and they offered you an apple, you would say yes. But if you're just in the mood to eat, or kind of what I often call like window shopping for food, somebody offered you an apple, it's like, no. It's kind of, you'd probably rather pass. So doing the thought experiment of an apple test is a good way to kind of check in and do a bit of a trial with your body. Oh, am I hungry enough? Would I want an apple right now? And that's usually a clue then that you are physically hungry. I'm certainly not suggesting that an apple is what you always need to eat. It's an example of a food that's kind of basic, but it definitely does a job if you're really hungry. So let's unpack a little bit further about what it means and why eating in a calm environment makes a real difference. So again, if eating disorders and binge eating is not really about the food, it's about other things that are going on in your life. And if you're working to reestablish and change your relationship to food, we want to change the environment that you're eating. And this is really useful, again, because if you were to tell yourself, I'm not allowed to have ice cream or I can't have chips, typically there's going to be a binge related to that. As soon as you say I can't have something, somewhere down the road soon enough, you're going to want it bad enough that you go get it. So you can eat whatever you want in this process. What we're really working on is the environment. So eating in a calm environment means eating without distraction. Sitting down at a place that is appealing to you, not necessarily your desk that's full of work or a kitchen table that's piled high with stuff, and not while you're driving in the car. If you actually need to eat while you're en route from one place to the other, what I really suggest is actually eating while the car is parked in the parking lot before you drive away, so that you can at least focus on your food even if you are in the car. So what you want to do is reduce other distractions. Consider even flipping over your phone so you can't see it, turning off the TV. If you eat with other people, making a request to avoid difficult or intense conversations. Even using dishes that appeal to you. Some people go as far as lighting candles in the beginning of this process to like really represent, I'm doing something different. It sounds silly to say this, but use plates, bowls, utensils, and sit down to eat. So a common practice with binge eating is that you're kind of like scanning the cupboards in the fridge, standing up, seeing what's available. And like, let's say there's a jar of peanut butter and a spoon and you're just kind of eating while you're standing. So one of the big tenets here is to always take what you want to eat. Even if it's, let's say, some crackers and cheese, instead of a handful of crackers and a piece of cheese in your hand, put it on a plate, sit down at the table. It really, really does make a difference. In fact, there is some fascinating research on food that shows that a lot of times we stop eating based on visual cues, meaning when the food's gone, we're done eating. And that's an external cue, not an internal cue. So you can imagine that if you were just reaching your hand into a bag of chips, it's really hard to know how many chips you've eaten, especially if you've been pretty distracted. I don't know how many people have had the same experience where you go to like reach for the next handful of something and you realize it's gone and you didn't even realize you had your last bite of it. Some of the food research actually has done things where like there's at a restaurant, people were given like free chicken wings. And at one table, the waitress would carry away all the empty bones and then bring out the next platter of free wings. But at the other table, she would let the wing bones kind of pile up and continue to offer, would you like more? And what they found time and again is that the people whose wings were carried away that didn't have like this evidence of how much they've eaten, they tended to eat more. And so what we know is we want to be able to visually see what we're eating and how much we're eating. It doesn't mean you can't go back for more or have seconds if you choose to it, but to be able to have your food on a plate, to look at it and to know, like, I'm going to use this to feed my body, that helps you reestablish clues and cues about how much food, like the volume of food that's going to be right for you. So eating in a calm environment, specifically sitting down when you're eating, and then putting your food in a plate or a bowl and eating with utensils. Those are some of the really big pieces that can start to make major changes in your eating situation. Okay, the third one is about enjoying your food. Ideally, eating is a time to rest, relax, to take a break from the world. And in fact, that's sometimes why emotional eating is really used when we just need a break from a busy day and you go to get a snack, not because you're hungry, but because you honestly just need a break. So the idea here is when you're eating, you want to be able to slow down and to enjoy it and to choose foods you honestly like. There's a lot to be said about saying that there's no good or bad foods, that there's room for all foods in a reasonably healthy diet. And we'll talk more about the 80-20 rule in the chapter on nutrition, actually. But there are no good or bad foods. You really can make space and budget for any of the foods you enjoy. Here's an interesting one, which is about not hiding or sneaking food. And honestly, it might be kind of surprising to spell this out, but that also really does mean, even if you live alone, we can hide or sneak food even from ourselves, where you kind of eat it like a little mouse and you're hiding away. You're trying to like not see it. Again, this is why the plating your food and sitting down to food is really important, because it's going to help you be really in a direct relationship with your food. Sit down, slow down, and taste each bite. So we've talked about why chewing your food is such a huge part of this process. Your ability to breathe while you're eating, to chew your food thoroughly to the point where it's a paste, and actually like tasting each bite is going to revolutionize how you eat. And the more you can be present with your food, you will grow in a relationship with it that will start to change things for you. It'll start to bring things into balance. So if you've got a habit of eating really fast, you can certainly put your utensil down between bites. It's an interesting practice. It takes actually a lot of effort. You could eat with chopsticks. You could eat with your non-dominant hand. There's some different ways to kind of slow down while you enjoy your food. And then we want to get to the fourth one, eating until you're satisfied. And this one is tricky. This one takes a while to work with. So don't pressure yourself to understand it or to get it right away, because it's subtle, and you're really starting to break this idea between what is fullness versus overfull for you. And I'm going to tell you too, this is why eating when you're hungry is really important, because our clue to being satisfied is when we're no longer hungry. So if you were eating not due to hunger, it's really hard to get the clue of I've had enough. It kind of just leaves the body in confusion. So these two pieces, eat when you're hungry, eat until satisfied, go hand in hand. And because we typically are externally cued about when to stop, meaning the food is gone, it takes a while to start to recognize fullness. So what I typically suggest is that you start to check in with yourself using this hunger and satiety scale, that 0 to 10, about how full you are. Even if it doesn't mean you stop eating, because a lot of times this is where it gets a little bit emotional, or I'll even say we can really rationalize. For example, the cleaning your plate. Let's say you're eating your meal and you realize, oh, I think I'm full. I could stop here, but there's only 3 bites left. That's a place where it gets tricky, because the rational mind's going to say, well, I should just go ahead and finish these 3 bites. What does it matter? Or that's too small to wrap up. Or I don't want to waste the food. There can be a lot of reasons why it's very hard to stop even when there's 3 bites on the plate. So in the beginning, just recognizing that you're full and that you could stop, that's an important marker. And then we're going to build on what to do to how to actually stop eating, because that takes some work. I will say that in this process, being able to, at times, wrap up small bites of food, like let's say even half a slice of pizza, or to be able and willing to throw away 3 bites of something, that's going to be pretty powerful and useful, because what's most important right now is that you're reestablishing trust in communication and balance with your body and the food. And honestly, I think sometimes we have to pick our battles. So nobody wants to throw food away. That's very true. And yet, in this light of picking your battles and your priorities, I'm going to tell you, it might be worth it to learn how and when to throw food away. So I mentioned the break the plate rule. One of the interesting assignments you can try is to actually, when you're about done eating, to leave 1 bite of food, to spend about a week leaving 1 bite of food. And what's interesting is that is surprisingly emotionally challenging. It's hard to even remember to do that when you self-assign yourself this experiment. But what it does is it starts to break up that external cueing that I have to eat everything. So just like leaving 1 bite for a couple days or a week is going to teach your body and your brain to start to check in with your body. And the 5th step is integration. That's really about checking in. And this is where it all comes together. You want to ask yourself at the end of a meal, how do I feel? What's my energy level? Did I eat fast? Did I eat slow? And am I comfortably full? And do I like the way I feel when I eat this way? So take a moment to reflect. And this process here, you could do that in 90 seconds. Just a quick mental check-in. Let's say mental, emotional check-in. Where am I? And you might even be able to say, how do I think I'll feel in 1 to 2 hours? So that you're getting an idea of how did this meal work for me? And the idea is to do that with compassion and curiosity, without shame or judgment. This is a learning process. You're going to be unlearning some things and learning some new skills. So you're never wrong in any of it. What we're doing here is gathering information. And if at the end of a meal you feel uncomfortable afterwards, it's important to check in about that too, and to be able to sit with the discomfort, to be able to tolerate that in a way that you are starting to create this understanding, a deeper felt understanding of how do these foods make me feel and what foods make me feel uncomfortable, and to be able to sit in that truth in a way that somatically informs you. Because when your experience of eating becomes integrated with all of its effects, not just the initial mouth pleasure, that's when you're really going to be able to become more attuned and intuitive in listening to what feels right for me. So this was an overview of the intuitive eating basics and the 5 major steps. I want to give you some experiments to do and to try so that you can actually make this real for you, make it personal, and start to integrate this into your life. So some of the homework could be to practice rating your hunger and fullness before and after meals. That's that 0 to 10 scale. You could also take some time to write out or journal about or think, how does hunger feel in your body? Again, do you feel growling in your belly? When was the last time you felt real hunger? Are you somebody who tends to more get moody, hangry, lightheaded, brain fog? Continue to build on the habit of chewing your food really well. Again, your food is ready to be swallowed when it's a paste in the mouth. Oh, and then that experiment of leaving 1 bite on the plate. And then here are some reflections to do for this chapter. What would I be doing if I wasn't trying to control everything? What would I do if I was in my full power? What steps and actions do I not want to take? When do I know my truth but avoid it? And what does my inner voice have to say? Okay, thank you for completing chapter 3.